Hey, it's Kristen from KristenOnDemand.com, and on this channel you will find videos all about teaching ESL online. And in this video, we are going to be talking about pacing. How do you pace your classes? How do we do this? Stay tuned, we are going to talk all about it. Okay, so pacing in the classroom. This is one of the biggest questions I get, especially from new teachers, is how do I pace my classes? What do I do? How do I make sure that I am on time, that I'm not, one, finishing class too early, or two, running to overtime, and that I'm finishing at that between 25 and 28 minute mark. The tricks that I'm going to teach you today for pacing, you can use them for however you need to pace your classes. So here are some tips and tricks that I use to help myself know where I'm at in my class, know where I need to be to make sure that I am on time for the classes. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to say about pacing is that don't beat yourself up because this does take some practice. Now, can I give you some tools and some tips and some things to think about? Absolutely, and I will do that. But just know that this does take some time to perfect. So let's go to my biggest and probably most preached tip that you will hear me do. Let's jump into that one. Tip number 1. Okay, so my first tip, and one that you will probably hear not just from me, but from a lot of other teachers as well, is you're gonna want to probably try to spend about a minute per slide. Okay, so typically, especially with VIP Kid classes, a lot of the classes are about 25 slides. So you figure your class is supposed to be between 25 and 28 minutes. You know, you're probably spending about a minute per slide. So with that said, if it's minute 5 and you're on about slide 4, 5, 6, you know you're about on pace. If you're 5 minutes into the lesson though and you're on slide 12, you know you need to slow down a little bit. You need to start extending that lesson, doing things maybe beyond the slide objectives. Again, to extend that lesson with the student and start just stretching the lesson a little more. However, if you are 5 minutes into the lesson and you are only on slide 2, which you probably wouldn't be, but in this example, say that were the case, you know you need to start speeding it up. So maybe you're extending too much, or the student is talking too much about things that aren't on the slide, and you need to stop that. Let them talk. Obviously, it's really good when the student is giving you output. You want that, but know that there is a place, and you know you need to be able to shut that down and make sure that we're meeting the slide objective, maybe going a little bit over, but you need to get through those slides because you need to finish that lesson, especially if you have a class afterwards, because you need to be able to get to that class on time. So again, knowing where you are and where you are in your time, that helps you pace. So again, if you're about on slide 12 at around 12-ish minutes, you know you're about on pace for the lesson. Now, where can this get tricky? Some of the new supplementary courses can have 40, 50, 60 slides, and those can get a little bit more tricky to pace because they're not going to be following that minute per slide pace. But again, if they're 50 slides, then you know you're probably going to be spending about 30 seconds per slide because you're just cutting it in half. You know, half of 50 is 25. You got a 25-minute class. So that's kind of how I help myself do the math. You know, if it's 60 slides, then I know, you know, a little bit less than, you know, some of the slides are just filler slides anyways, and you know that. So you know that you don't need to be spending a whole lot of time on every slide. And then if you get to the end and you're like, well, I have, you know, 5 minutes left and I have 10 slides left, that's pretty perfect. But if you have 5 minutes left and only 5 slides left, you know, you really need to stretch out those slides, extend. And that's just how I usually do those classes with with the longer amount of slides. So that is my biggest tip to you as far as pacing. It's still something that I use in my classes today for pacing, is watching my time based on the slides to kind of know where I'm at and what I need to do to get to where I need to be if I am not on pace. Okay? So let's move on to tip number 2. Okay, so tip number 2 is learning how to extend. How are we going to extend that lesson if the kid is flying through the material? I know this, and you're just like, oh my goodness, I am only 3 minutes into this lesson and this kid is on slide 12 and there's only 23 slides in this lesson, and what am I going to do? You need to learn how to extend the material and how to ask questions and pull more out of each slide. So I'm going to be doing another video soon on extension specifically, but this is a skill that you really need to master and hone in on, especially when you find yourself in trouble with your pacing. So if you, again, are only a few minutes into class and your kid is just zooming through, which does happen. They study the material, they know the material, and you are just letting them fly through. Ask more questions. Stop. Extend beyond the material. Maybe they know exactly the questions, the sentence frames on the slide. Try to figure out, okay, what else can I ask? How else can I ask this? What other things can I bring into the lesson that complement the lesson to extend that lesson and maybe, build up that time for you a little bit? And parents appreciate this also. Another thing that you can do is, if you've taught the student before and you know that they just zoom through the lesson, take that into consideration when you're building your reward for the student. I have a video on secondary rewards, and one of the rewards that I like to use is a tic-tac-toe, which the kids love, and I like to use that one as an extension piece as well. I will sometimes put, if the student is old enough, vocab words in the tic-tac-toes instead of like numbers in the squares, so they can choose vocab words. And that's a way to extend and have the reward take a little bit longer than you get a star or something. Or choose a reward if you're using Google Slides. There's tons of conversation starters. Pick and choose, build something, rewards that get them thinking and take a little bit longer. That can be time fillers too, that can help you with those students that can extend, need that extension. Build it into the reward. Parents appreciate that, and you will too once you see the time ticking away as part of that reward and it's not all just on you. Okay, so that is number 2, and let's move on to number 3. Okay, so number 3 is going to talk about, what do you do if you have a student who's just blah, 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 doing their own thing. Either they're talking too much, they're not paying attention, they're playing with their toys, and they are not zooming through the lessons. They are doing the opposite. You are trying to just pull them through that lesson. Maybe it is minute 17 and you are only on slide 9 and you are like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get through all these slides in 25 minutes? Because how am I going to do this? So you need to find ways that you can bring the student back to you. If you can't, it can't always be done. I mean, sometimes you just have the students that are they're on their phone or they're writing something, and you can try to say their name, and they will participate for a little bit and then they go back to doing what they're doing. My best advice there is just to keep at it, keep trying, be annoying. I'm like the annoying little fly or gnat that's just like in your face the whole time, and I don't care. Jerry, hi Jerry, will you read for me? Jerry, read for me. Jerry. I don't care. Eventually they do it, and we just need to get through that lesson. And all I'm doing in those classes is literally the very basics of trying to meet every little slide objective. And when you have a class like that, you see what very little there usually is to do on the slides to meet the slide objectives. And that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to get through that lesson. And then I will put in the feedback to mom and dad to let them know, it would be great if, Bao Bao paid more attention, he would get more out of the lesson, we could do blah, 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 and just kind of let them know that way. Again, and then if they watch the feedback, they could see how much I was trying to engage their child and how much I was just pulling them through the lesson. But there are things, try to get their attention. If you have a bell, ring a bell. If you've taught them and you know what they like, try to lure them in with some kind of a reward. Like, oh, I have your reward. Let's work. We'll do your reward. A lot of times that will work. Just being funny, silly, goofy has worked for me before too. Like getting them to laugh and then they're like, oh, this class is fun. And then they want to participate. And sometimes the material in classes, especially there's chunks of level 3 that can just be really dry, and the students it's just boring for them, I think. Not so much learning English, but just the content of what is being taught can be a little dry. So I sympathize with them a little bit. Like no one really wants to read about, I don't know, mammals and reptiles, and it's just boring. So anyway, there's nothing we can do about that. That's the content. It is what it is. Try to make it as exciting and fun and engaging as you can. That is when you're going to want to bring in props and silly things and fun rewards just to try to keep the class alive as much as you can. Keep them engaged, keep them focused, pull them through that lesson. Show mom and dad you're trying, this information isn't the most fun, but you're trying to keep that Bao Bao engaged, focused, and at least meeting those slide objectives so you can pull them through that lesson and hopefully keep them on pace. Pull them, pull them, pull them. Okay, and as far as pacing goes, those are really my biggest tips and tricks. How to stay on pace initially, to know in your head where you need to be, how to kind of gauge where you need to be based on where you are was number 1. Number 2, use extension to kind of pull more out of the lesson. And 3, how to pull those slower, molassesy kind of non-engaged students through the lessons if they're, for whatever reason, maybe they're just having a bad day or the material's dry or whatever's going on. Sometimes you just have lessons like that where you just feel like you're pulling teeth to get those students through the lesson. So some kind of tips and tricks that you can do to get those students through the lesson. Again, if you feel like, oh my goodness, we're never going to get through all these slides. So on those classes, you just want to stick to the bare minimums. Just make sure you're hitting those slide objectives just to get through that lesson. So I hope this helps you. If you have any specific questions, you can always reach out to me via email or in the comments below. And I hope you subscribe for more videos like this, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.